Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be back with you, and I always say that after I've been gone for a couple of weeks. Today, though, is kind of a special day for us because we have decided to develop a theme around prosperity for a good part of this year as a congregation. So during my next several messages, you're going to be hearing a lot about prosperity, and we're going to be conducting a special class on prosperity starting in April, and there'll be more details that will come about that in the coming weeks. But this will sort of whet your appetite around the subject of prosperity, because we definitely live in a prosperous and an abundant universe, and all we got to do is to partake of it. We do live in an abundant universe, and abundance and prosperity are all around us. Actually, all we need to do is look at our church home and see what beautiful surroundings there are around us. And that beauty is part of the prosperity that we're able to partake in. When you think about it, a lot of Unity churches don't have their own place. They rent a place, or they have a big heavy mortgage on it, or something of that nature. We are blessed to actually have a place to hold our services and to conduct our educational programming that blesses us. And that, of course, is a form of prosperity. What we need to do to partake of prosperity is to develop the appropriate state of consciousness, because all prosperity actually comes from consciousness. Well, prosperity is a subject that we talk about a lot in Unity and New Thought. There's also a topic that is a reoccurring theme in the Bible. Prosperity is not something that has just been talked about in recent decades. It is something that has been talked about really since the times of the Old Testament. And actually, our message today focuses on more of the classical teachings and metaphysical teachings around prosperity. And some of the information that I'm providing today is based on the work of Catherine Ponder. And Catherine Ponder is one of the classical teachers of prosperity in Unity, and probably a number of you have read her works, and I'm pretty sure there's some of her books out in the library somewhere. The Bible contains many stories about prosperity that are just as relevant today as they were a few thousand years ago. In our message this morning, we are going to consider stories of prosperity from the first book of the Bible, Genesis. We're also going to take a look at the prosperity teachings of Moses and, of course, our way shower, Jesus the Christ. Our message this morning will also focus on a couple of the greatest patriarchs from the Genesis account in the Old Testament, and those patriarchs being Abraham and Joseph. Secondly, we will look at Moses. We will consider how Moses taught the principles of cause and effect and lived his laws of prosperity. And when we look at these, it's amazing how someone would say, in a contemporary way, they are relevant to our own lives today. Finally, we will delve into the life of Jesus as a teacher of prosperity. Two of his teachings that contain gems of prosperity are from what are known as the 8 Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer, and we will delve into some of those gems of wisdom. Let's first take a look at the patriarchs of Genesis. Abraham has often been called the father of the Hebrew people in the Old Testament. During the early years of his life, Abraham lived in the Babylonian city of Ur. And most of you can find a lot of the information about Abraham beginning like around chapter 12 of Genesis. As a result, he was able to observe the wise business practices of the residents of the area, because one of the ancient empires in Bible times, and in Old Testament times in particular, was ancient Babylon. According to ancient writings, Abraham learned the laws of prosperity from another famous Bible character, Melchizedek. Melchizedek, some of you might remember, has been, at least in the Bible, referred to as the longest living person, 960 years or something of that, to that effect. That's a quite a long time to live if one actually literally believes in that number. In Hebrew, the name Abraham means father of height or father of exaltation. So when we're thinking about spiritual consciousness, we're talking about someone that was on a very high plane of consciousness. According to prosperity teacher Catherine Ponder, this refers to Abraham's uplifted state of mind. And all of us, if we are going to experience prosperity, we need to have that exalted state of mind as well. Abraham was a man of faith. God made the following promise to Abraham at Genesis 12, 1 and 2, and I think we can say that this same promise was made to each and every one of us in this room this morning. So I'm going to share with you Genesis chapter 12 and verses 1 and 2. Now the Lord said to Abram, and that was Abraham's name before he became Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." God promises us prosperity and blessings as well in our daily life. As a result of this promise, Abraham departed Babylon. Think about it for a moment. Say if you had it really good, you had a nice house, nice community to live in, and all of a sudden, based on promises of God, you're just going to uplift yourself and become a nomad and just travel around. And that's basically what happened in the case of Abraham. This departure metaphysically represents moving from a material and competitive state of consciousness to a belief in the creative use of mind. And we're taught, too, that we need to creatively use our mind to bring about our prosperity. The journey of Abraham into the land of Canaan symbolizes moving away from a belief in any visible wealth to the ability of the conscious mind to create wealth from the invisible through one's thoughts, words, and actions. Because the substance of prosperity is actually invisible, but we have the ability through the use of our mind to actually be able to tap into that substance and then to manifest that substance as prosperity in our life. Abraham teaches us that prosperity is first created mentally. Through this process, we learn how to mold the invisible realm of substance into our good. And just think about it. A lot of the most prosperous people today believe that they can create substance. And I've said this a number of times, and I know it, especially in today's political environment, it might be a little controversial. But one thing that I personally agree with what Donald Trump has said in the past is, he was asked once, if you lost all your wealth, what would you do? He said, I would know exactly how to go about recreating that wealth again. That's a state of consciousness, that when we are able to accomplish that. And each one of us is able to do that. There's nothing unique about persons that are wealthy in the world being able to create a prosperous state of mind. The first billionaire of the Bible was Joseph. By being sold into slavery in Egypt by his brothers, great opportunity was opened up for Joseph. As a result, Joseph actually became the second most powerful person in the Egyptian empire next to the Pharaoh. And many of us are probably familiar with the story about the famine in Egypt and how Joseph was a food administrator at that period of time. But yet, Joseph went through much adversity to get to that point where he was the second most powerful and probably the second most wealthiest individual in the Egyptian empire. Joseph symbolizes the ability to create substance through the power of imagination. And we know that in unity, imagination is an important concept. We need to be able to picture in our minds what we can accomplish. Through appreciating all the wealth he saw in Egypt, Joseph was able to picture himself as having great prosperity. Can each of you picture yourself as being prosperous? And that's a question you need to ask yourself individually. Joseph had the picturing power of mind. While in Egypt, Joseph experienced great injustices. How would you feel if your own brothers sold you into slavery? And yet that's the experience Joseph had in the Genesis account. But from this experience, Joseph learned the right to prosperity cannot be taken from you, and that forgiveness of others opens the floodgates of one's good. And one of the common themes of this message this morning is that forgiveness is essential if we are going to be open to good in our life. That takes us to Moses. And most of us are familiar with Moses and the Ten Commandments and many of the stories of the liberation of the Israelites. The deliverer of the ancient Israelites from bondage was undoubtedly one of the great historical themes that is mentioned in the Old Testament. And Moses also was able to manifest the laws of prosperity in the way he led the Israelites. Moses was one of the first leaders in the Bible to point out the important teaching of cause and effect. And again, that's a very common teaching in unity. Catherine Ponder described Moses as a mystic. Ponder defines a mystic as one who lives from within outwardly, as he uses the inner laws of the mind to meet his practical needs in the outer world. Think about that for a moment. A lot of times when we think about going within, we don't think about living without. But he actually was able to project his life from within to the world outside of him. And as a result of that, was able to create huge prosperity for himself. Moses taught us that nothing can keep us from our good, but we must be open to our highest good in order to receive it. And that's something that's important as well too. We also can transform our thinking about life through the words we use. And that's why a lot of times we got to be careful with the words we use. And none of us are probably going to do it perfectly. I don't either. But a lot of times it's very easy to put a lot of power into words that are very negative. And a lot of times then that becomes our reality because those are the words that we are using to describe our existence. Another key secret to the prosperity of Moses is the ability to see the good in even negative situations. Actually, the word Moses means to draw out. When Moses was a baby, the Egyptians had sort of an anti-Israelite campaign that went on. And his mother actually put him on an ark in the bulrushes on a river in Egypt, and he was floating down that river when Pharaoh's daughter discovered Moses. Moses actually was able to be raised in a very affluent atmosphere because of the interest in Pharaoh's daughter in him. And probably some of you probably have seen the old Ten Commandments movie and Charlton Heston and all that good type of stuff as well too. So Moses was able to experience the royal Egyptian household. Metaphysically, the water represents the negative side of life out of which there are possibilities for good. A lot of times I say that we need to look at what we perceive as negative experiences and see what good there is in it. And I've shared with you many years ago when I had a relationship that didn't work out and I was beginning my early work in this area spiritually. I was told by someone, be grateful for even the seemingly negative things that have occurred in your life because they make you who you are today. And a lot of times it can be just as simple as, be glad that relationship never worked out, because otherwise you might have been gone through a divorce. So think about that for a moment. But it's little things like that that we can be grateful for. We can see positive things in. The Ten Commandments that are often associated with Moses have a great metaphysical meaning. And we're going to read some of those Ten Commandments now from Exodus chapter 20 and verses 3 through 7. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. And probably many of us grew up memorizing these 10 commandments. But let's take a little bit more of a metaphysical look at these commandments, especially through the lens of prosperity. We're going to especially take a look, because we don't have really time to go through all of the 10 commandments, we're going to take a look at the first 3 commandments and how they apply to prosperity. The first commandment indicates we only must turn to God for our abundance and supply. God is our source. And I think a lot of times, even in churches, there's a lot of emphasis on talking about your bank account or how your investments look and all that type of thing. That bank account and those investments are not our source. God is our source. And so the first commandment is basically saying, remember that. Our good comes from God. It doesn't come from how much money, we might have, on our balance sheet. The second commandment instructs us not to hold any mental images of lack. So when we're talking about graven images, we're actually talking about elevating negative conditions of lack in our life to that of a god in our life, or to a graven image in our life. Instead, we only see abundance and supply. Finally, we speak no words of failure, poverty, or disease, and that's what not taking God's name in vain actually means from a metaphysical perspective. We only speak words of health, prosperity, and well-being. It is so important that we have a mindset of prosperity. And it is also so important that from that mindset that we also are careful with our words. Jesus. Our way shower Jesus consistently taught prosperity in his teachings. Today we will focus on those teachings known as the Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer in the Gospel accounts. First, we're going to take a look at the 8 Beatitudes, and that can be found in Matthew 5, 3 through 11. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Well, again, we don't have time to go over each beatitude. There is wisdom to be gained by looking at the metaphysical interpretation of some of these important verses. Verse 5 tells us the meek will inherit the earth. Jesus was assuring us that our good is guaranteed. We are guaranteed to be able to inherit the earth. If we are meek enough to follow these teachings on prosperity, our success in life is guaranteed. God promises us that our success is guaranteed. All we need to do is believe and put one foot in front of the other. Of course, it is important that we take steps. Years ago, I knew someone that was praying for prosperity to get a great job, but she never sent out any resumes. Well, and she says, well, nothing is happening. God promises us that prosperity is guaranteed, but it doesn't mean that we don't have some work to do. We just don't know exactly where that good is going to come from. Verse 7 indicates the mercy that will be shown if we are to receive our good. We must be merciful to others as well too, because we need to be an open vessel to receiving our prosperity. By readily forgiving others, there will be no blocks to receiving our divine inheritance. Years ago, I belonged to a church that had a lot of turmoil in it due to financial issues. And I remember the minister, I believe, talked to Edwin Gaines, who's a modern prosperity teacher in Unity, and she told the minister, "You don't have a financial problem with your church, you have a forgiveness problem." And sad to say, this church is no longer in existence, but I think there's a lot to be said for that. If we're not willing to be forgiving to others, then we're not going to see good come into our life, because lack of forgiveness blocks good from coming into our life. The Lord's Prayer also contains teachings of prosperity, and I'm going to read Matthew 6, 9 through 13. And of course we sing this every Sunday, and of course some of us may even use this in our regular prayer life on a daily basis. Pray then like this: Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In verse 10, we ask that God's will be done. It is God's will that we be the inheritors of the kingdom. Who else is going to get it? We are children of God. We need to believe that God only wants the best for each and every one of us. As a result of that, we will inherit the prosperity and the wealth that are promised in the Bible. In verse 11, we ask for our daily bread. God will take care of us. How many times have you heard of stories where somebody was down to their last dollars, or sometimes even their last pennies, and an unexpected check came in the mail? That's a form of prosperity. It's a form of God taking care of us. God will provide, and God has many channels through which to provide for us. Verse 11 encourages us to be forgiving, so our channel is open to receive our good. In verse 13, we pray not to be led into temptation and to be delivered from evil. And of course, we have a different thought about evil here in Unity and New Thought. Evil usually has a lot to do in Unity with being somewhat spiritually underdeveloped, not actually labeling somebody in that kind of manner. But it's so easy to be tempted to believe what is taught out generally in the population and in the world, that we have to do something in a particular way to earn wealth, when in reality we don't have to earn anything. We need to believe, and then we need to take some steps consistent with what we believe. It's very easy to fall back into old ways of thinking. So we do not want to be tempted to fall back into those old ways of thinking. We can be assured that we are prosperous and that we receive according to the level of consciousness that we hold. Prosperity themes abound in the Bible. Our thoughts determine the level of prosperity we experience. Being willing to forgive is a prerequisite to prosperity. The Bible teaches us how to manifest prosperity from the invisible realm. Lastly, our consciousness determines just about everything in our life. So our goal must be to keep rising or spiraling upwards to higher levels of consciousness. By applying these ancient principles, we will inherit the prosperity that is reserved for children of God. Namaste. Deep, relaxing breath, exhaling away any of the tensions you may be in this moment. God is my source of infinite abundance. While I recognize God as the ultimate source of my good, other people also are channels through which my prosperity flows. Employers, employees, customers, and co-workers are all channels of God's unlimited good. Conflicts are quickly resolved as they remember we are here to serve one another. Just as others contribute to my financial increase, I also share prosperity with others in my life. As I pay bills, I give thanks for the service they have offered. When money or other forms of prosperity come my way, I am grateful for the law of circulation. Whether I give or receive, my loving attitude strengthens our connections. Today, I thank God for the people who are channels of prosperity in my life. Trusting the prospering power of Spirit, I open to new and infinite blessings. Prosperity is the divine abundance of every person. Reaping God's bounty comes by accepting responsibility for my consciousness around matters of wealth. I affirm that the indwelling God is my instant, constant, and infinite source of supply. And I allow myself to feel the truth of those words. I nurture these seed thoughts in the fertile soil of divine substance and weed out any thoughts of lack or limitation that may be spoiling the fruits of my labor. Even if the landscape of my outer life appears barren, I faithfully keep my thoughts centered on the divine ideas of abundance and sufficiency. As I cultivate my consciousness, I open the way to new and infinite blessings. Now we will enter into a few moments of silence as we contemplate the prosperity and abundance that surround us.